Well, welcome everyone. It's nice to see another packed house after 15 years. I guess it hasn't gotten old, right?
I guess not.
Still keep on filling the room. That's great. Good evening, everyone. I'm Stephen Bronfman, along with my sister Ellen. And on behalf of our other founders of the Charles Bronfman Prize, my brother-in-law Andrew and my wife Claudine, we'd like to welcome you all to this year's presentation. We started this prize more than 15 years ago as a gift to our dad on his 70th birthday. It took us a couple years to get organized and get it together, but here we are 15 years later. Dad actually shot his age on the golf course the other day, so that was pretty good. Here, yes. But you know, instead of buying him another set of golf clubs, we decided that the prize might be a good gift for his 70th birthday, to honor the work that he's done to create a more just world and to encourage the next generation to do the same. We're so happy that this year's recipient continues that tradition. We are here tonight to celebrate Amy Bach and her work, which focuses on using data to compare the performance of the criminal justice system. I'd like to welcome Amy's nominating team, along with those who are here from the organization she founded, Measures for Justice. Welcome. And as proud Canadians, I'd like to welcome the Honourable Phyllis Yaffe, Consul General of Canada. Thank you for joining us here this evening. Finally, I'd like to extend a special welcome to our panel of judges. I think they're on the screen. Yeah. The Honourable Dan Meridor, former Prime Minister of Israel and former Minister of Justice. Professor Amitai Ziv, the founder and director of MESER, the Israel Center for Medical Simulation, and deputy director of Sheba Medical Center, who is here with us from Israel, as is Dan. The Honorable Stuart Eisenstadt, former U.S. Ambassador to the EU, former Deputy Secretary of the Treasury, our Judge Emeritus, the Honorable James Wolfenson, former President of the World Bank, and Justice Rosalie Silberman Abella, the first Jewish woman appointed to the Supreme Court of Canada, who will be speaking on behalf of our judges this evening.
Thank you. Hi, good evening. So, Justice Abella has been a key member of the Prize family from the very beginning, around, I guess, when we started with the golf clubs.
The not golf clubs.
The not golf clubs, the prize, not the golf clubs. But more importantly, Rosie's life has been all about justice. Among her many honors, in 2017, she was named Global Jurist of the Year, awarded to a sitting judge who upholds and defends human rights or principles of international criminal justice. And just last week, Justice Abella became the first Canadian judge to become an elected member of the 275-year-old American Philosophical Society. And not only that, she is one of our personal heroes. So we're very happy to honor and to welcome Justice Rosalie Abella.
I think I come to these events not just because I'm a fan of the Bronf persons, but I love those introductions. Thank you. Yesterday, some of the judges went to see To Kill a Mockingbird with Charles and Rita Bronfman. The play, as you know, is a metaphor for a particular justice era in the American South, an era of stereotypes, segregation, and ignorance. It's not an era in which Americans take pride, but it is an era whose cruel vestiges remain. But so do the vestiges of decency and courage the play evoked. It is in recognition of that decency and courage that the judges decided to give the Bronfman Prize this year to Amy Bach. In his 1963 letter from Birmingham jail, Martin Luther King wrote, "Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. The world Amy Bach works in is a world where the arc of the universe is long, but it most decidedly does not always bend towards justice. It's a world where law and justice are too often in a dysfunctional relationship, a world where fairness is too often sacrificed on the altar of expedience. And as we saw this past weekend in a synagogue in Poway, 6 months ago in Pittsburgh, 1 month ago in a mosque in New Zealand, and last week in Sri Lanka, a world where prejudice can poison and hate can kill. It's a world where too many rights abuses go unrecognized, let alone confronted. Too many people lose their dignity, too many people are poor, and too many people lose hope. In other words, it is not by any stretch the best of all possible worlds, but it is the world Amy Bach is trying to fix, one county at a time. Measures for Justice, Amy Bach's brainchild, asks, who's in jail, for how long, for what crimes? It's become a flashlight that shows us that that punishment without compassion distorts the necessary balance between punitive retribution and aspirational rehabilitation. A criminal justice system that takes those who live at the intersection of disadvantage and desperation, then ignores the inherent vulnerability that flows from their race, poverty, or disability, risks transforming them into even more powerless victims. These are people who expect and are entitled to get the utmost in rights protection because these are people at risk of losing the utmost right, their freedom. If they don't get it, they may give up. And when they give up, they disengage from social membership. It is, as a result, a criminal justice system that produces recidivism instead of a criminal justice system that produces justice. All this and more we see from the data carefully researched and compiled by Amy's Measures for Justice. That data is the evidence that turns theory into facts we can see and judge. And what's at the heart of those facts? The disheartening and tragic truth about the criminal justice system in the United States, presented for our scrutiny and our judgment. But Amy's purpose is not to condemn, it's to teach, to bring these matters to our remedial attention in order to help everyone in the justice system make better choices. She knows absolute justice isn't possible, but she also knows that the reduction of injustice is. So what has she taught us? That we should not tolerate a justice system where access to justice means access to a wrongful conviction. That we should not tolerate a justice system where fear trumps morality. And that we should not tolerate a justice system where the most vulnerable are the least protected. All justice systems are supposed to be guided by a moral compass that guides the public towards justice. When injustice is courageously revealed by someone like Amy, it's up to the rest of us to acknowledge it, denounce it, and redress it. That's how we fulfill our duty to the future. And that's why Amy's idealism is really pragmatism. It's a way to help fix what's broken in the American criminal justice system so that in the future, millions of children will find a fairer world to grow up in, where they will not have to experience or watch their parents experience disrespect, dislocation, discrimination, or despair. And if it's a better world for those children, it's a better world for all of us. That's what justice means, and that's what Amy Bach is trying to teach us. On behalf of all your grateful students, Amy, thank you for trying to make the future better, and Mazel Tov.
Thank you so much, Rosie. That was an amazing few words. We thank you for everything that you do for the prize as well, so thank you. This year, it's hard to acknowledge Amy Bach without, as as Justice Abella was just saying, without noting that there's not a day that goes by that we don't hear something in the news these days about criminal justice. We celebrate Amy tonight as a true pioneer for justice, and the fact that she's founded this organization that uses data to give the public a true understanding of how the criminal justice system is really working. Tonight we'll hear from a member of Amy's nominating team, the Honorable Samantha Power, former ambassador to the United Nations and cabinet member under President Obama. Ambassador Power is a professor at both Harvard's Kennedy School of Government as well as at Harvard's Law School. She's in the process of putting the finishing touches together on her latest book, so we are especially grateful that she was able to make the time to be here with us this evening. Please welcome Ambassador Samantha Power.
I wouldn't have missed it for the world. It's a special privilege to be here and a special honor to meet Charles Bronfman and be a part of a ceremony that honors the values he has stood for his entire life. I don't know really anybody else on this earth who has done so much for decency and humanity and who is very much still at it, and we can expect much more to come. We are gathered here today, as the judge sort of highlighted, to celebrate the Bronfman Prize winner during what feels like a particularly dark time. We should remember, of course, that everything is relative. As the Bronfman family knows, there have been far darker times. But today's horizon is clouded by several structural problems that seem hard to surmount. First, our society is riddled by inequities. All men and women are created equal. All of us are born and made in the image of God. Yet, whether because of race, religion, sexual orientation, class, or just where you happen to be born or be from, people in this country and all around the world don't all have the same chance to reach their potential. Second, we have entered what some have deemed a post-truth moment. Now, amazingly, the great scholar and prophet Stephen Colbert saw this coming way back in 2005. I was Googling this today, and I'm just shocked it was so long ago. So 14 years ago, he saw this coming when he coined that phrase. You remember it? Truthiness. So recall the old Stephen Colbert Comedy Central character ridiculing dictionaries and reference books as elitist. Quote, "I don't trust books. They're all fact, no heart." The truth, Colbert said, came from one place, the gut. The gut. That was 2005. My predecessor, a while ago, as U.S. Ambassador to the United Nations, Daniel Patrick Moynihan, once said memorably, "Everyone is entitled to his own opinion, but not to his own facts." But today, we are seeing people will their way out of everything from climate science to vaccinations. The realm of opinion is a vastly expanding empire, penetrating fields that had previously insisted on empirical grounding. The spread of falsehoods and the rejection of even the possibility of objective truth has left us often feeling like we lack a shared factual basis on which to base public policy and on which to engage in reasoned discourse. Third, and final, from me at least, structural ailment, partly because of the falsehoods that today masquerade as facts, we are riven by unprecedented political polarization. At just the time we need to come together and problem solve over inequality and injustice of the kind we're going to talk about here tonight, we are polarized. And at a federal level, we appear to have lost much of the ability to work across the aisle. This isn't just a problem among politicians. In 1960, Only 5% of Americans said they would be upset if their child married someone in the other political party. In 2010, 49% of Republicans and 33% of Democrats said they would be mad. For some reason, people seem too afraid to do the poll today, but we know how much more disturbing the results would be because in 2017, per Pew, only 9% of Republicans and 8% of Democrats say their spouse is a member of the other major political party. So the salience of our political identities is now far greater than the salience for so many of us of all that we actually have in common as parents, as neighbors, as citizens. Now, some of you would be forgiven if you were thinking right now, all of this is very interesting, a little familiar, interesting, but we didn't come here today to talk about the bad news. We came here to reflect on some good news. We came here to show our appreciation for Charles Bronfman and the entire amazing Bronfman family, and to pay tribute to them for the wisdom that they have shown in rewarding what they call innovative, bold ideas to improve the world. A nice, underambitious aspiration there. And of course, we came here to celebrate the recipient of the Bronfman Prize this year. Well, I have news for you. It turns out that the antidote to the forces that I have just described is your awardee today. The founder of Measures for Justice, the mother of 11-year-old Leo Markman, and one of my closest friends, Amy Bach. So today, we should celebrate Amy and Measures for Justice. We should invest even more in the organization, in their work. It's path-breaking work. But I want to also argue something else, that we should follow the trail that Amy has blazed out of the trifecta of doom: inequality, truthiness, and polarization. In Measures for Justice, we can see the remedies that we need to combat our larger ailments. So let me say just a brief word about each. Amy came to the work that she does today because she traveled around the country for several years as a reporter, hanging out in rural courthouses, charming town clerks, interviewing first-time defendants and many others, and day in and day out learning, asking questions and learning. She observed that for every headline-grabbing news article about a sleeping lawyer in the courtroom, the system had different, hidden, non-newsworthy flaws. She used her writing to expose the first of these three ailments: injustice, inequity. Her writing depicted Americans who were experiencing extreme degradations of legal procedure and of law, substantive law, on a daily basis. Endless backlogs meant that cases languished, people lacked legal representation and rarely got individualized attention. They paid huge fees, which drove them into debt, and the procedural safeguards that many of us had learned about in law school were ignored, or they proved irrelevant in practice, in the real world. In 2009, Amy published her masterful book, Ordinary Injustice: How America Holds Court, which made visible what had been invisible, even to well-informed observers of the American legal system. Amy shone a bright spotlight on different aspects of the broken justice system: varying bail amounts, varying prison terms for the same crime, courtroom wait times. The issues that she highlighted were too small to see and yet deemed too chronic to fix. Her writing exposed huge disparities in how people were treated under the law in the places that she studied. But because justice was being dispensed in 3,124 counties all across America, it was not easy for her or for anybody to distinguish the anecdotal from the systemic. When Amy saw that a person who committed a misdemeanor in one county, in one state, was being treated vastly differently than a person who did the same thing somewhere else, she didn't know if this was widespread or if it was a one-off. So she set out to make the invisible visible, but now in a more systematic, comprehensive, and enduring way. she created Measures for Justice, an organization that gathered data from places where nobody had gone looking before. In so doing, she showed that in 2 counties in Wisconsin, for example, not a single felony case had gone to trial in the previous 5 years, not one, because every defendant pleaded out, suggesting to her, and I think to an objective observer, the denial of a right to a jury trial. She found counties where poor people were convicted up to 3 times as often for drug crimes as those who committed the exact same crimes who were not poor. Amy saw that measurement and facts and empiricism were essential. And she saw that policymakers would never change what they couldn't see. So Measures for Justice is a living antidote to our second ailment today, the move away from facts. Her organization has created a novel set of objective measures that make it possible to break down data by race, sex, age, and type of crime at the county level for the entire justice system, all the kinds of issues that I've mentioned that she will talk about in a minute, from arrest to post-conviction. Amy has used her data to expose what Hannah Arendt might have called the banality of injustice. So Amy confronts injustice, she returns us to hard facts, and finally, despite today's unprecedented society-wide polarization, our third ailment, she and her organization have somehow cracked the code and done their work in a bipartisan way. Through immensely savvy political maneuvering, they have managed to convince Democrats and Republicans alike to turn over data that had been closely guarded or just lying somewhere undiscovered for years. They've been able to do so even though much of that data doesn't actually reflect glowingly on judges, defense attorneys, prosecutors, county clerks, bail wardens, you name it. But as Amy says, quote, "Our superpower is that we have created a neutral language. All of our measures go to things that both left and right can agree on: fiscal responsibility, fairness, public safety." The Koch Institute supports their work. In Florida, Amy reached out to Republican State Representative Chris Sprowls, who is set to become the Speaker of the Florida House in 2020 to 2021. Sprowls is a former prosecutor, so Amy thought he might be interested in Measure for Justice's Florida data. After a few conversations, to his credit, Sprowls invited Amy and her team down to Florida to present to the Judiciary Committee. They used the opportunity to educate the committee, again on the behest of this Republican state rep, about what data they had, what they didn't, and what they could not know as a result. Within just a few months, Sprowls had spearheaded passage of a bill and ensured that that bill would collect and make public a standard set of data elements based on Measure for Justice's wish list. Now, finally, in closing, I'll just share one last thing about Amy. Although Amy's entire career has been dedicated, I think, with maybe a tiny little thing at the beginning before she got into all of this, but basically her entire career has been dedicated to studying large and small injustice. My favorite thing about Amy, your honoree tonight, is that she has retained an incredible capacity for surprise. When this person gets access to a new data set, and this does not make lively reading, right? This is data, right? Bail fees, length of this, this is pretty soporific stuff. When she gets access to a new data set, when she finagles her way to get people to give over information that they've been hoarding for all these years, and when she burrows into it, her colleagues and her husband, John Markman, report that Amy Bach is prone to gasp. She gasps. Imagine still gasping after 2 decades working on this issue. She has refused to get desensitized to the injustices of our system. She is also on a lifelong quest to prevent the rest of us from getting inured. So my last words here, let me say that it just may be that even more than her refusal to accept injustice, even more than her rejection of truthiness and her fealty to facts and truth and objectivity, even more than this bipartisan savvy that we never knew she had, maybe this capacity for surprise, this refusal to be desensitized, maybe this is the best and the most far-reaching reason for recognizing Amy with the Bronfman Prize. Because Amy has given us a clarion call for this age, for this time. And what is it? We cannot, and we must not, and we will not get used to this. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador. I understand, I kind of get what you mean about Amy gasping when she gets that information, because information is really an access to power, and what she's excited about is she's getting more power to create more social justice. So I get it. Now we're here to think, to listen, and to learn, and what we're going to do now in this next series is we're going to after a brief video of Measures for Justice, we'll have the pleasure of listening to a conversation between Amy Bach and Sarah Koenig, host and co-creator of the podcast Serial, which is so popular it has been downloaded more than 340 million times. Sarah joins us tonight after completing Serial's third season, which chronicled a year in Cleveland in a Cleveland, Ohio courthouse. Before beginning their work in Cleveland, Sarah and her team all read Amy's book, Ordinary Justice, How America Holds Court, and considered it required reading. Thank you, Sarah, for being here with us, and let's check out the video.
In the United States, criminal justice is largely handled at the local level, but data on what's happening from place to place is hard to find. The Measures for Justice data portal is starting to change that. This comparative database offers a clear picture of how criminal cases are being handled across the country, county by county. Here's an example. Trials are a cornerstone of our justice system, right? But as it turns out, there are counties where fewer than 3% of felony cases are resolved at trial. The portal allows you to see differences no one's been able to see before. As the portal suggests, every county has its own way of doing business. You can use the filters to find out if the criminal justice system treats people with different backgrounds equally. You can filter data by race, sex, ability to afford an attorney, and more. In this county, jail sentences for non-white defendants with nonviolent misdemeanors were 3 times longer than sentences for white defendants. In this same county, defendants with nonviolent misdemeanors who could not afford an attorney received jail sentences 3 times longer than defendants who could. Diving into the data can lead to some surprising results and a lot of questions. Why are there discrepancies across counties and demographics? What can we learn from them? The portal is a great way to get these conversations going, and with more data coming in every day, we're only getting started. Check it out at measuresforjustice.org.
Can you guys hear me? Are our mics on? Yes?
Testing. Yep.
Testing. I am so excited to be talking to you. As we just heard, Serial Season 3 was about a year we spent watching cases in the felony courthouse in Cuyahoga County in Cleveland. Their main courthouse is in Cleveland. And Ordinary Injustice your book was a huge influence on that because of the way you so just neatly flicked aside the kind of bad apple notion that it's sort of, we can pinpoint these certain bad actors, and then if we get rid of those people, it's going to be okay. You just showed how nicely it was like this sort of soup of factors. And so when I saw that you were doing Measures for Justice, and we found out about Measures for Justice, and I was like, why would she do that? Like, she's a writer and a reporter, and you're an attorney, right, as well, right? You're like a really smart person. So I was like, why with the numbers? No, I mean, which was like, I was so happy about it, but I was like, why did you choose this to do with yourself?
Well, the whole origin of the book and really the organization began in this one county called Quitman County, Mississippi, and it's about an hour and 15 minutes south of Memphis. It's in the Delta, and you walk into this courthouse, and it's, you know, quote unquote trial day, and there's supposed to be trials and people lined up, you know, just like there are in places across the country, and there was like nobody there. And I went down to the court clerk, and there was this woman there, and her name was Miss Brenda Wiggs. And I said to Miss Wiggs, "Where is everybody? I thought today was trial day, and I was going to, you know, report on this for my book." And she said, "You want to know? I'll show you." And she pointed to this list of cases above her desk, and they were handwritten cases. And she said these cases were people who were charged in a lower court called Justice Court, and they were bound over to Circuit Court. And she said, by law, the district attorney has to present all of these cases, you know, to the grand jury, and the people in the grand jury can decide, yes, it's a good case, it should go forward, or no, it shouldn't. But he never presents anything. I go, well, what do you do with the list once you're done? And she says, I take it down and I put up another list. So I said, can I have these lists? And so I took the list and I Xeroxed them at her, in her little office, and I started to like gather all the files. And I went and I talked to the police and the sheriffs, and I tried to figure out what were the missing cases. And what I found was that entire categories of cases had just disappeared. I met this woman, and she had been beaten up horribly by her boyfriend underneath a bridge with a tire iron. He just beat her, and there were pictures in this file of her with like blood on her face, and she had been in the hospital for 3 days. She couldn't work because he had beaten her so badly, and her daughter, the whole beating happened with her daughter and her niece, who were young, I think they were 5 and 7, just watching the whole thing inside a locked car. And I went to the woman and I said, you know, do you know why your case wasn't prosecuted? And she said, I have no idea. So I went back to Miss Wiggs. I said, Miss Wiggs, why wasn't this case prosecuted? And she said, let me look. And she looks back in her really, you know, primitive little computer. And then she went into this back hutch and she saw these huge bound volumes with gold embossed letters on it. And she said, he hasn't prosecuted a domestic violence case in 21 years. Oh, and I said, are you sure? And so we looked again. And so then I went to the prosecutor and I said, do you realize you haven't prosecuted a domestic violence case in 21 years? And he said, has it been that long? And then I went to other counties around, right? And I said, do you prosecute domestic violence? And it turned out they all have, but it was so, like you said, it was so hard to just get that one data point. Like, do you prosecute domestic violence? You would think that they would be able to look. And they couldn't even figure that out. So then I started saying, well, why don't we compare counties and see, like, don't you want to know how you're doing? How do the people know? And if you ask the people in Quitman County, they also, oh, no, domestic violence, that doesn't get prosecuted. But the question is what are the patterns and why we can't see them? And so that was really, and so that was the conclusion of the book, and then it all kind of, you know, came from there.
You're a natural data collector. You're such a good storyteller. Yeah, like
but that's the ultimate thing. The ultimate thing, yeah. And this is why I know I love your work so much. Is I'm serious. I know it really is, because it's the ultimate 1-2 punch. Is data with a story.
Can I just say? I can't tell you, I was like a lonely puppy at the window with the Measures for Justice website, because there were 6, you started with 6 states analyzed. Ohio was not one of them. But I kept thinking, like, any day now she's going to put Ohio up there. I kept clicking and clicking. But so
well,
there was.
Can I just say one thing about Ohio? Yeah. We have to go. So Ohio, all right, so we've mapped the country. Yeah. And there are certain states that you got to do. Like, you got to do New York, right? We're working on it. We're doing 20 states by 2020. We were really lucky that we could do Florida. We have to do California, and you got to do Ohio. So we've mapped the country into orange, which means the data's, you know, not that great and hard to get and hard to do. Yellow and green, and Ohio's yellow.
Wait, what's the other one? Yellow?
Green is a go.
Yeah, green's good. What's yellow mean?
Yellow means it's possible most of the counties you could get if you went county to county, but there's no centralized database.
Oh, yeah,
so you
yeah.
could try and do it. But I've had my eye on Ohio. It needs
Not fast enough, sister. Anyway, I just wanted, I thought of you and your work so many times, and I know we called you during the season. I think we called you guys for help. But I just want to play this one clip to give an example of like sort of what you're up against. So this is a clip of me talking to, wasn't in the series, but it's a clip of me talking to a judge in Cleveland. And I was trying to figure out, I was doing a story about this young woman who was in a bar fight. And in the midst of the fight, she accidentally whacks a cop, and so she gets charged with felony assault on a peace officer. But she was young. She had gotten a bail of $5,000, which I thought was a lot. It sounded like a lot to me. So I was asking this judge, what is that amount, that $5,000? What is the rationale for that figure? What is that figure based on? And then can we just play the clip?
Based on what we've always done, not on anything having to do with her, okay? See what I'm saying?
But aren't you looking at her record?
Yeah, you are. But I'm saying what you're looking at is, okay, she's charged with assault on a police officer. That can't be good. And oh yeah, and then she's head of the criminal activity. Okay, that can't be good. This looks like a $5,000 case.
And that number, I know you're saying it's based on what we've always done, but what we've always done, what is that based on?
Nothing. That's what I'm trying to tell you. You know.
It must have an origin story.
Oh, it doesn't have an origin story. That's what I'm telling you. That it doesn't have an origin story. It's always been your gut level feeling. You know, if there was anything that you could hang your hat on, then that would make sense. This makes no sense.
When you hear him say that stuff, okay, like what comes to mind?
Oh my gosh. Okay. The first thing that comes to mind is this judge in my book who, in Troy, New York, and he gives $25,000 bail to a homeless man for not having a bell on his bike and riding his bike on the sidewalk. And then he does these bails, just these outrageous things all the time. Like this one guy, he was like, oh, you know what? He always comes and pleads guilty. I'll plead him guilty for him. You know, so he just pleads him guilty. Don't bring him in the court, just let him go. And it's that kind of degradation. And the reason it happens, okay, where these things, there's no sunlight on them, first of all. And the reason it's allowed to happen is because everybody in the courtroom is sort of slapping each other. They're happy that they get to go home early. They were polite to the defendant in the room. They've got some niceties, some appearance of justice, but no one's really looking about how it's actually working. Because the question is, were his bails appropriate? Does he know? And how do they compare to other justices in other counties? In the case of that judge, you know, why can't we begin to see what they're doing so that people, whether it's the people in the courtroom themselves or people in the communities, can say, hey, you know what? It wasn't fair. It happened to me. It's happened to him. Let's do something about this. And that's what's missing, is that sense of agency, that sense of let's do something about this.
It seems like in all of your work from your book, and then also with Measures for Justice, the thing that you seem to be battling sort of across the board is just entrenchment. This idea of a kind of culture of the courthouse. Because I think, certainly from what I observed in some of the reporting I've done, but you must see like in all over the entire country, is like that sort of courthouse culture is where unfairness and injustice kind of like nestles in and gets comfortable. And so it seems like you're saying, like, forget about this, like, this is what we've always done. We need to look at the fundamentals, like, look at the data and figure out what's happening. And one of the questions I have is, it seems like racism is entrenched in our system. We know this, the numbers are out there, there is, it feels like pretty good reporting that's been done, just like across the board, every single outcome is worse for you if you're a person of color. How can data battle racism?
Okay.
Or can it? Maybe
Well,
it can't.
so, first of all, there's an incredible amount of momentum in criminal justice right now. You just heard Ellen say that there's a story every day. This is our moment, and it's been because of people like you who bring these stories out, and also because of these like massive statistics. 1 in 4 Black men are incarcerated. The question is where that macro number comes from. It comes from what happens not just in New York County or Bronx County, but what happens in Erie County and Livingston County and Onondaga County. It happens in all of these little counties, 62 counties of New York. So what you've got to do is look in the counties and begin to look at what the racial disparities are, and when they're big, go in and start to ask questions and say, like, why is this happening? Now, that said, the problem is that people are afraid to look. And that's why I know you said in the beginning, you were like, why is she doing this? And it's because there is so much resistance to wanting to see, to wanting to really look. And that's what people are afraid of. But the funny thing is, there have been people who looked at our data and saw enormous problems, and then often they fix things, and they come back to the people and be like, we did, treat indigent people differently than non-indigent in terms of who got deferred, and we fixed it, and then they look great, so if people have to stop being afraid. Yeah.
It's like my father used to say, all facts are friendly.
There was this one judge in Wisconsin, and he was so angry at us for being there. And I spent
Like you came knocking on his door, he knew you were coming.
Well, he was an important judge in the state.
They're all important.
That is true. They are all important because they all talk to each other.
Right.
And I remember I was in his chambers, and I was showing him the data early and being like, you see, and I'd heard that you were so upset about it. And he looked at it and he said, you can't compare 2 counties. You just can't. It just happens differently from one county to another. It has to do with culture. There's a different culture. You can't compare them. It's like comparing an orange to an apple. And so I said, well, why can't you compare an orange to an apple? Like, why can't you, like, one's orange and bumpy and one's red and smooth? Like, what's wrong with that? Like, why can't you do that? And he looked at me and had, like, smoke coming out of his ears, and he said, because I don't want a tomato in my fruit salad. And so then I was like, what does that mean? And I was thinking about it, and I was like telling Fiona, who's our director of communications, this, and she goes, what does that mean? And I said, it means get out of my state. It's like I don't want everyone to see how we're doing. But he survived, they all survived, and now they're fixing their data. It's all good.
The difficulty we had in Cuyahoga County, the county was a little better. The city of Cleveland, it was appalling trying to get even the most basic information. Really, I mean, they don't know their clearance rate for murder cases. They don't know whether crime is going up or down. Literally, like, it's bad. And so what you're doing feels impossible to a person like me, just knowing how hard we work to scrape and claw our way into just some very minimal stuff. And also the discrepancies you'd get. So you'd ask the police department, and then you'd ask the court, and you'd ask the prosecutor. The numbers do not line up in any way, so you have to start all over again with the raw data. Like, you're dealing with 3,000 counties. I can't even imagine. And I want to know your funniest story or weirdest story about where you found data that you didn't think existed or didn't know existed.
We find, I wish I could think of one, but we find like funny, weird things in the data. We have like a channel on Slack where people will say, oh my God, someone just mentioned, the word porcupine in the data or something like that. But we did get this envelope So basically what we do is we go to counties and we say, hi, I'm Measures for Justice. We rarely FOIA people, which is forcing them to give us data under federal or state law. I mean, rarely do it. We only do it often if they ask us to, because we want to convince them, we want them to be a part of it. But we convinced these prosecutors in Washington to give us data, and they sent us Xeroxes from a steno pad. So like, in other words, they had written things like in cursive handwriting on a little steno pad, and then just like, and here you go, here's my steno pad of all the data, of all the, I was like, this is how you keep it? And that is how it happens in a lot of places in America.
But you guys invented, I mean, you were telling me that you, like when we do it, you know, we do it the dummy way, where we're like, well, I think they probably keep track of like how many assault cases came through. But you invented a whole, yeah, just talk about that for a second. I find that so
Well, so there's 3 categories of workers at Measures for Justice. There are like the data researchers, and they have masters and PhDs in criminology, and they work out of our office in Rochester, New York. And then there are the technologists who partnered with them to make it go faster. And then there's like this third category of people that are data outreach. One of the people who founded it is here tonight, Caroline Sarnoff. And basically, they're incredibly charming, like Caroline, and they're out there, and they go and they basically convince people to give the data. And people will say things like, you know, we don't know how to get our data out. We hear that all the time, and we're like, no problem, we've got a technologist. And the technologist comes and what we do is whatever argument they say, we take that argument away.
That's so smart.
So we send the technologist down, or we work with them until they feel safe and comfortable. And we promise, and we do, go back with the analyzed data and give them a first look. And we say to them, look, you know, and this is really interesting. We say, look, you know, if you see any problems with it, we'll fix it. So they get a first pass at it. And the other thing is we say, we'll give the data back to you. Now, this is really interesting. I thought everyone was going to want this clean data back, because we take their mess and we make it into gold. So like you could do analysis.
You're typing up their steno pad, basically.
Yes, we type up their steno pad. And very few people want it back because they don't even have the people to do the analysis on it.
Oh, they're like, this is just a pile of numbers to me. I don't have time to go through this.
Yep.
Oh my God. Oh my God. What is there? What's your biggest, this is a weird question, I guess, but do you have a fear about this data being used? Is there a wrong way to use the data? Do you ever think like, oh, I hope they don't?
Well, okay, that's all we thought about before we released the data. Yeah, and the reason is because, you know, there's what they call perverse consequences. And what you don't want to have is, you know, to create, you know, like the way they have in, you know, in schools where there's so much focus on test scores, let's say. So they take away gym, and they take away, you know, whatever. So we wanted to make sure. So we devised the measures with it in mind that it wouldn't get distorted. So we never call out one person or one part of the justice system with the idea that each part, we measure from arrest to post-conviction with the idea that each part of the system is connected to the other. And we also measure you know, the whole system so that everybody can get together and have a conversation and feel like they're not being bad-appled. And then we put a whole bunch of what we call contextual information in, so that it was never that something can be taken out of context. If someone was like, oh, well, that's because, you know, we don't have any African Americans. That's why. Well, the context is there. Or that's because we are a poor county. Well, the poverty rate is there. So it's all there. So there's people say, our challenge is we have so much data. It's like drinking from a fire hose, because we've put in all of this context to make sure that it was responsible, and so that the people who worked in the justice system, quite honestly, would feel like we were responsible and they'd give us the data again.
Right. So you are single-handedly responsible for getting both Florida and California to pass legislation.
I wouldn't say.
I know, but this is right. Like, you worked on this. So Florida recently, and then just now, like a minute ago, California now are requiring.
Well, California is trying, which is very weird. When does California follow Florida? this is like the one instance that I think it might happen, because Florida like saw our data and they were just like, where did you get this? And it's yours. And then we, as Samantha said, we went down and we explained how we did it and what data they had and they didn't have. And we did something called a data gap analysis. And that was huge, because when people had never been able to see what was actually missing. And it's the same thing as making the invisible visible, right? Like, here's what you're missing. Here's what you don't have. So we did, for California, a data gap report with Stanford Law School, and we showed what data they didn't have, and a legislator grabbed onto it along with the district attorney in San Francisco, and they introduced legislation. It just got through the first committee. It's going to appropriations, so fingers crossed. But others,
I was a little jumping the gun on California.
Jumping the gun, but we're hoping,
okay.
And we've heard that other states are following too. But I mean, and this will be the trend, that
Right.
states will pass these laws, and you will see so in 20 years, the Sarah who's doing cereal,
I'll be very, very elderly.
right, will be able to reach down into the heart of America and be able to see where the disparities are, or there are no disparities, or it'll be a different world because we'll be able to know the facts.
This is my last question for you, which is, once these states really start seeing themselves as how their courthouses are working, what is the thing do you have a sense, I guess, of what is the biggest misconception they have now that will be debunked kind of by the numbers? Like, what are they going to discover, do you think?
Well, one of the things that I'm really excited about is we're doing 20 states by 2020. And so in 2020, we'll be able to really tell you something about justice in this country. What I think that people are surprised about so far is, there's so much said about race and, racial disparity in the data. It's really about poverty. It's really, if you're a person of means versus somebody who uses a public defender or is indigent, you have a completely different experience from our data. You are, a person of means is usually gets diverted, even if they have the same criminal background for the same minor crime, whereas someone who's poor does not. I think they will be surprised by how they have treated poor people over the
Because they're saying, like, well, we have a public defender's office, we have an assignment attorney list, like, we're good, we're covered.
But it's poor people who bear the brunt.
Yeah. I mean, I'm now the third or fourth or fifth person to say this tonight from the stage, but like, I think this is a huge national service to like our whole country, and so I'm just in awe of what you're doing, and I'm so grateful. But personally, I'm also hugely grateful, because reporters need you. We need your data. We need what you know to allow us to tell the stories that we need to tell and we want to tell. So I just want to say, from this privileged seat here, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate it. That's awesome. Thank you.
Congratulations.
Wow, what a great conversation. That was so fantastic. So as we're moving on, we're coming to the close of the event, but I would like to ask my father, Charles Bronfman, to please come up and present the Charles Bronfman Prize to Amy.
Well, thus far, it's been quite an evening, and I want to thank everybody for being here. I want to thank Ambassador Power, Justice Abella, Sarah Koenig, and everybody else who would like to speak and isn't going to about this wonderful prize winner for 2019. Every year I stand here and I say that this is the best present I've ever had in my life. So I want to put it a little bit differently tonight. I want to ask you what you would think if your children suddenly gave you something and you would be able to meet an Eric Rosenthal. Eric, where are you? Eric Rosenthal, who has gone around the world for the last 25 years addressing the terrible problem of children who are put in chains in confined quarters in insane asylums without any retribution. How would you feel if you met an Amitai Ziv, a doctor who had been an Air Force pilot, where are you, Amitai, who invented and pioneered simulation as is done in the Air Force, but done in medical school and in medical science? How would you feel if your children suddenly gave you the opportunity to meet a Sasha Chanoff, who's here tonight, who has taken the most indigent and subject to torture people in Africa and being able to settle them in countries around the world? How would you like to meet and admire so much and follow all the time Rebecca Heller, who has been a pioneer in this country in immigration and in the problems of immigrants not being able to assess or access lawyers to help them with their problems? And how would you feel if you were able to hobnob with Samantha Power and with Rosalie Abella and with Jim Wolfenson? I'm so happy that Jim is here tonight. And with Amy Bach, and with Stu Eisenstadt, and with the in-laws, with Andrew and with Claudine. I mean, how would this feel to you guys? You know, this is something that your children do for you. Now, they could have gone out and done their own damn prize in their own names, and it would have been wonderful. But they chose to say, Pop, we think you've done an okay job, so here you are. So God bless you, my children. Now, this is all very nice. The only minor problem I have is I don't have the prize. So, Amy, you have to wait till next year. Where is the prize? Is there a prize? Oh, there's the prize. Oh, it was in front of me. Amy, I'm not just going to ask you to come here and accept this, but I always think that people who achieve great things do so with partners. And I would like to ask your husband, Dr. John Markman, and your son, who's going to be the general manager of the Buffalo Bills in 2045, to join you on the stage as you accept the prize. Thanks. Yikes, it's heavy. It's very heavy. Right to the camera. This is given to you with full heart and with great joy, and I'm blessed because I'm not a judge, so I don't have to take responsibility. However, I do know that like every other winner of this prize, and people have to be under 50, this isn't a career-ending prize. This is a career in the middle of the road going up and up and up. So I wish you every good success that you'll have, we know. And John, I know you'll have your success in your medical world. And as for you, Leo, you're a great kid.
I want to thank the Bronfman family for this incredible award. Charles and Rita, you are the best kind of people, and I am so honored to be here and to be a part of the Prize family. I can't even tell you. Likewise, Ellen, Andrew, Stephen, and Claudine. I cannot think of a more profound way to honor your father and all the values he stands for. So all we can hope for in this life is the opportunity to do good work And this prize really gives Measures for Justice the opportunity to do so much more. Now, remember the story I told you about the woman who was beaten up under the bridge while her daughter and niece watched from inside a locked car, and the prosecutor who had no idea he hadn't prosecuted a domestic violence case in 21 years? We are going to make available so much current and relevant data that policymakers and legislators and prosecutors and public defenders and anyone can look up a county and say, it's not just me, it's not just her, it's not just him, there's a pattern here. And either you fix it or watch us elect people who will. Now, alongside this work, you're going to see a domino effect of states creating legislation to improve data collection, and of people using the data to have really difficult conversations they were never able to have before. Measures for Justice, we're going to ride this wave of nonpartisanship and momentum to change criminal justice, and we're going to get to all 50 states to full transparency. The award is such a stroke of luck, but I can't help thinking about how much it reminds me of how Measures for Justice got started. So after my book was published, a representative from an anonymous donor called to say that there was this person out there, and this person wanted to create a measurement system like the one I envisioned at the end of the book. So I wrote a proposal, and this donor gave us $100,000. And I still don't know who this person is, okay? And if you're out here tonight, okay, I just first of all want to say thank you for betting on us. And also to say that we turned your $100,000 into millions and social change that exceeded everybody's expectations, and also mine. All over America, there are people, and they're sitting in jails, and they shouldn't be there. And this work we are doing, mark my words, will be able to change that. So to the Bronfman family, I want to say that we're going to do the same thing with your award. And we're going to, in 20 years, you will be able to look and see what you made possible tonight. To the International Panel of Judges and to Jill Collier-Indyk, thank you so much for considering me and for the work of my whole team with so much care. Sarah Koenig, when I heard Ordinary Injustice inspired season 3 of Serial, it was like I won the Super Bowl, and it's like the Super Bowl that plays in my head with this alarming frequency. It's data and stories that change how we think about the world versus the status quo. You are my sine qua non. And of course, I want to thank my nominators, Judge Rosemary Barquette, who gave me my first job and now sits on my board and still takes my calls all these years later. You are a towering inspiration. Samantha Power. When I told you this one time that I was lying on the floor, I was in a particularly bad moment, and you said, I love the floor. Thank you for your compassion and generosity. David Clafter and Georgia Cohane and Diana Wan at the Pershing Square Foundation in general, which really got our work off the ground, especially Amy Herskovitz. These great people bet on us before anyone else would. They don't call you angel investors for nothing. I want to thank our other partners, the MacArthur Safety and Justice Challenge, the Chan Zuckerberg Initiative, Google.org, Arnold Ventures, Echoing Green, Draper Richards Kaplan, Koch Institute, the Donner Foundation, the Bomber Group, the Tao Foundation, Open Society Foundations, Ford Foundation, the Bureau of Justice Assistance, and the Bartons. Thank you for making structural change in the justice system a possibility. Now, it's probably worth noting that a writer is always in conversation with someone. The best writers usually have the best editors, and in my case, my thought partners are my friends. Too many to name here, but one of my heroes, I think, is here tonight. I haven't seen you yet, but I'm gonna call you out. I hope you're here to hear Steve Bright. Thank you for taking me to that courtroom in Greene County, Georgia. You changed everything for me. Measures for Justice really started with 2 people. Today we are 31. But back when we were 2, it was me and Samantha Silver, my sounding board, my agent of good. Lucky for all of us, she is the child of therapists. Not one therapist, but 2 therapists. So she is inherently working on all of us to be our best selves. She is fiercely intelligent. Thank you for taking MFJ from success to success. There are 3 other people whose contributions have been out of this world. Gypsy Escobar, who masterminded how we do the work. She is the measure in Measures for Justice. Andrew Branch, our brilliant director of technology, and Fiona Mazel, who directs communications and is really one of the most effective people I've ever met. Jerome DeRoy, who has helped me with storytelling. You are a guru. Thank you for being in my foxhole, you guys. And to my board members, Ed Schallert, our chair, Rick Morello, for the wise counsel at any time of the night and day, and your stewardship from the very beginning on that porch, along with David Shipley, Justin Ehrlich, Kirsten Levington, and of course, Judge Rosemary Barquette. Of course, I wouldn't be here without my family, my parents, Gil and Bonnie. You've inspired me, and you've supported me in so many different ways. Also, my home team, Sister Nancy, mother-in-law and fashion advisor, Muriel Markman, and my brother-in-law, Vic. And as for my husband, John, you are not only the original donor of Measures for Justice, but its prime mover. It's your difficult questions that push me. When I finished my book, you told me, no, you cannot open a juice bar. But instead, you must fill the prescription outlined in the epilogue of my book. You came up with the slogan of Measures for Justice, no data, no change. And my favorite thing is that you set it to a Bob Marley song. No data, no change. You are my safe and sound. Finally, to Leo, my son, thank you for being quiet in the car while I'm on the phone all the time. I won the lottery with you, and know that you will change the world just by being in it. No data, no change. Thank you for sharing this special night with me.
Data, no change.
We might make the whole audience sing that together.
I remember.
We just want to thank everyone for coming tonight. And we also have a big team. We're not going to name everyone. We just want to mention we have so many readers who help us to evaluate these amazing nominations that come across our desk. And as my father said, you know, the chance for us to be able to meet people like Amy and all of the other prize recipients. We've got a bunch of them here, and there are a bunch of others who didn't make it here tonight. But the stories that we've learned and the fields that we've learned about through all of your work is so inspiring. But I also want to just take a moment to thank our prize team, everyone who worked so hard to get this night together. And a special hearty thanks to our executive director, Jill Collier and Dick, whose passion is almost as passionate as what you just witnessed in Amy with every year. And it's just been phenomenal working alongside her. So thank you, Jill, and thank you to our entire prize team.
Yeah, we've been super lucky just to be able to meet all these wonderful people year after year and do our little bit in trying to highlight these wonderful social entrepreneurs that we get to work with year in, year out, and just try and get more and more people to meet them virtually and just highlight the stories of people that are really doing wonderful things to make our world a better place. So mazel tov to all the winners, mazel tov to you, Amy, and please join us for a little muzzle in the room
We have a
behind
nice
us.
reception behind us.
Yeah.
So please
Thanks
join
everyone
us.
for
Thank
being
you.
here, and congratulations, Amy. Very nice.